Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's good to see you, Jeremy, Noelia, Alexis, Francer, Jackie, Licenciado Kumar. Very professional looking, Kumar. I need to go and put mine. Francer. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3 groups. And of course, our listening audience, Shamira, Desiani, Jackie, Marcella, Alex, Delcy, Winston, Indra, welcome. And I would like to also extend our bienvenido to Miss Carmita, my beloved sister, who has graciously accepted to be with us today as facilitator, not leaving behind the Honorable Maestro Justin Vera, who's also professionally well attired tonight. Good. So I invite Justin to play our theme song. Maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds would be enough.
Tu sangre viene de lejos para juntarse a la sangre mía. Y al golpe de los tambores se hizo más fuerte nuestra consigna.
That was a short version of the long song. Maybe at the very end, Justin can play us a little bit more. But Belize da Fowi, Belize is ours. Belize es nuestro, right? And as we were talking yesterday in our second forum, I told the panelists that the responsibility just begins, El trabajo apenas comienza, ¿no? Because you see, as I must have said at some point in class, what is homeland? Homeland is a gift to be fulfilled. No, we receive the homeland, but it's not a thing. It's a responsibility that comes with the right to be, right? So, young people, ladies and gentlemen, you are the Belizeans that will take over. We are on our way out. And we are giving you the gift of homeland that we received from our elders. So we need to start working, right? It's a new episode. And this episode apenas comienza. We have all been building since the Mayas, the Tipu episode, the contact with the Spanish and the British, the era of enslavement, the coming of all refugees, whether mestizo, Icaiche, is Indian, Chinese as indentured workers, the coming of the Lebanese after the wars, the Mennonites, the birth of the Creole population, and the expatriates that have made Belize their home. So All of these are narratives, and today we are celebrating the Belizean narrative, and we are all proud to be part of this narrative, of this gift to be fulfilled. So welcome to the third and last in the series of the Belizean Studies panel. And we are today focusing on the narrative of the migrants, those who have made Belize what Belize is today. So we are reflecting on the migrants and their story and how their story has impacted and keeps affecting positively the whole notion of homeland in the making. So we reflect on that this evening. And with all of you, we will engage in conversation to see how best we can make use of the attributes of the migrants to build a national unity. Okay, so I will share my screen to look at the proceedings for today. And the whole forum will give you 24 points or 30% of your grade. So there will be 8 aspects of grading, which you know already. Ms. Carmita, Justin, and myself will be doing separate assessment, and then it will all be average. So how are we going to start? I have given a sort of welcome and introduction, and you will start. Each group will have 5 minutes to deliver the reflective essay, what you prepared at home eh, um, as a group of 2, right? Um, and you have been given the aspects that you need to have in your presentation. After that, we will have 25 to 30 minutes to engage in conversation. And that this is where myself, I will start the conversation. Um, I will have maybe 10 minutes, then I will turn it over to Miss Carmita to continue the conversation with you. And then if Justin wants to intervene at the very last, he can do so. But that's 25 to 30 minutes. It's not for us, Ms. Carmita, myself, Justin, to talk. It's for you to talk, to converse, because it's a conversation. And the conversation will, of course, rest on what you have presented and tie it in with the theme presented by Ines Sanchez, the role of Belizean history in a cultural revolution, what Sister Barbara Flores expounds on in culture, spirituality, and transformation, Undoing the Colonizer, and the birth of the nationalist movement in Belize, and the questions that you were given. Basically, if the facilitators so choose, can select any question so that we can spark the conversation. And of course, after that, we summarize with concluding remarks and give you the final word. And that's it. That's it. That is it. Okay. Any questions? If there are no questions, I now invite the first group to present. Who volunteers?
I do, sir.
Okay, Noelia, you present your group, your working partner, and begin.
Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
My partner is Jeremy Hernandez and myself, Noyato. Long before the coming of the Spaniards, there were people in these native lands. These indigenous people are ancestors of all these great nations. The Zapotecs, the Mixtecs in Oaxaca, the Teotihuacanos and Yucateca of the East Coast settled and developed in the southeast, which includes the modern countries of Belize, Guatemala, El Salvador, Western Honduras, and the Mexican state of Tabasco, Chiapas, Yucatan, and Campeche. During the Case War in 1560, the Maya were brought to justice for praying to the gods for rain and a good corn harvest. Under the torture, the accused Mayas confessed and implicated other people. Guilty or not, everyone was tortured. Ancient Maya books were burned. Imagine how advanced civilization would be if we had equivalent of the Maya Plato or Aristotle or Da Vinci. According to Peter Wallace's story, the English first came to Belize in 1638. English cutters were driven out of the Bay of Campeche where the logwood obtained high prices in England. This started a long quarrel between the Spaniards and the English because both wanted to benefit from their colonies. The native people land, forests, minerals, and taxes. The Spaniards believed that they were justified in taking these lands because they were the first to arrive and discover these lands. The English argued that although Spanish claimed Belize, the English were first to occupy the land. The Case War was an indigenous war that began in the 1847. This war resulted in many Spanish-speaking refugees settling in Belize. The Maya, however, had to relocate. They relocated to the northern and western areas. The principal reason that the Case War occurred was because of the economical and political system. The Case War lasted from 1847 to 1901, which was 54 years. The Mayans were rebelling in order to keep their land. In the end, the win was taken by the Mayas in the year 1847 to 1883. Then, in 1884 to 1915, the Guatemalan, Belizean, Mexican recaptured the Yucatan. To wrap up, as Dr. I.E. Sanchez explains, we must find our identity in our culture in order to know who we really are. The Maya have been in our land of Belize for centuries as they are native people of this country. The Maya ethnic group, which has the surname Tut, Kokom, Uk, and other surnames, remember their ancestors. Despite entire libraries of knowledge being lost, the soul remains alive. I remember as a child, I was taught of that the land, the plantation, the river, and the rain were gifts from the gods. Everything on the planet has its purpose and a God. I also remember that when I sat on the veranda and I started to rain heavily, my parents always told me that God is angry with the human beings. Today I end with this statement: we have made God angry again.
Thank you very much, Noelia, for sharing that narrative on the Maya. We proceed now with the second group, volunteers for the second narrative.
We go next.
Okay, Alexis, go ahead.
Good evening. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, your audio is very poor.
How about now? I'll join and then I guess I can go third.
Okay, as Alexis continues trying, Noelia gave us an insight on the first kind of group of people to inhabit these areas. And she traced it all the way to the 20th century. You ready, Alexis?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So, good evening. My pair consists of Francer Manzanero and myself, Alexis Guy. We'll be presenting on the story of the Mennonites' arrival to Belize. So, the Mennonites' journey home. Belize proudly boasts an array of unique and distinct ethnic groups contributing to its rich history and culture. Although small in number, the Mennonites have greatly impacted both our economy and way of life. Mennonites are known for the establishment and maintenance of agriculture in our little jewel. However, the story of their arrival to Belize remains unknown to many, and they teach us to uphold traditions, remain united, and work hard. The Mennonites in Belize are often dubbed the Wanderers. This is due to their extensive journey before establishing their safe haven on Belizean land. Menno Simons, a former Catholic priest, established the Mennonite Church in Holland in the 1600s. It was a breakaway from the Catholic Church, and people were being persecuted to practice this Anabaptist faith. Hence, the Mennonites sought freedom to practice their faith and educate their children accordingly, so they migrated to Canada. However, after World War II, the Canadian government aimed to unify the education system, so the Mennonites again migrated to Mexico. Furthermore, Mexico's climate was not good for their agricultural practices, and Mexico sought to reform their school system. A group of Mennonite men then traveled from Mexico to Belize, and they fell in love with the potential of the land. They made a deal with government officials. The Mennonites would be able to freely practice their faith without having to enroll their sons in the country's military in exchange for them establishing a much needed agricultural presence. Thus, the first families settled in Spanish Lookout Caya in March 1958. This group of peace-loving and conservative people can bestow many lessons on our Belizean people. It is easy to know a Mennonite based on their modest and uniformed appearance and simple way of life. Hence, this shows that Mennonites uphold their traditions, beliefs, and practices while still speaking their native languages within their communities. This is a good lesson for Belize, as our Belizean culture is quickly fading due to the outside influences easily penetrating with the advancements of technology. This is also owed to the lackadaisical efforts of new generations of the varying ethnic groups to stay true to and practice the traditions of their ancestors. Moreover, despite varying sects among the Mennonite community, they all demonstrate unity. Belizeans are segregated due to differences in race, ethnicity, class, etc. We should strive to live in harmony and support each other as the Mennonites do. Furthermore, it is obvious that the Mennonites are hard workers as they are responsible for 85% of the country's meat, poultry, and dairy products, while also dabbling in furniture and honey production. It is time that more of our Belizeans begin to work hard. We have become complacent in doing the bare minimum, and many rely on the government to provide for them, while others may resort to stealing. Therefore, the Mennonites' successful journey, establishment, and maintenance of an industry which benefits us all directly should be the blueprint for our diverse ethnic groups to become one Belizean people. Thank you.
Alexis, can you read the very last line I missed on that? The very last line.
Therefore, sorry, the Mennonites' successful journey, establishment, and maintenance of an industry which benefits us all directly should be the blueprint for our diverse ethnic groups to become one Belizean people.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good. We now proceed with the third and last group, and that's Kumar and Jackie. Go ahead.
Hello everyone, my name is Jackie and my partner is Kumar, and tonight we chose the topic Maya. So, Central American countries are well known to be rich in ethnicity due to historical events in the past. Belize is a great example where we can see this diversity of cultures. Our country is composed of many ethnic groups. These are Mestizo, Garifuna, Creole, East Indian, Asian, Mennonites, and Maya. But as rich as we are in ethnicity, we must not forget the true natives of these lands. The first group to inhabit these lands was the Maya. They originally lived in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, then later made their way down to neighboring countries, including Belize. However, the Popol Vuh, classified as the Maya Book of Council or the Book of the People, specifically portrays and tells of the creation story from the Maya's perspective and their journey to these lands. According to the Mayas, in total there are 4 accounts of the creation of man, and their origin is said to have started in the continent of Africa. As they made their way to these lands in Mesoamerica, they separated and formed different groups and cultures. The Maya that situated in Belize specialized in many things. For one, they were great farmers and were the innovators of the milpa system, which led to their abundance of food even as of today. Maya also had a pottery gift and they were geniuses in mathematics, not to mention their ability to communicate through verbal and nonverbal ways such as through hieroglyphics. They built their empire with massive architecture using the skills of crafting. They also foretold time by creating their calendars. Though originally, many people assume that the Mayas have disappeared and they no longer form a part of our diversity. However, that is not the case. The Maya today make up 11.3% of our population according to the demographics of Belize. We admire the Mayas for many reasons, in particular for their persistence, the value they place on land, and their independency. The Mayas were and still are a very persistent race. They fought against the Spaniards and other invaders to maintain their beliefs and system of government. To be more precise, they fought for their home and their culture. As a Belizean looking up to the ethnic groups that make up Belize, specifically the Maya, gives a sense of pride, and I've learned that we should keep our culture vibrant and alive and don't let it fade away through the years. The Maya who pioneered the milpa plantation have shown us that looking after our environment is an important aspect of our culture. The milpa plantation has a great effect on a piece of land, especially during these harsh times. The lesson is to take care of our environment as it is important to the generation that is to come and to help this country thrive with resources. Today, the Maya live in self-governed communities. They still go by the ways of their ancestors, excluding sacrificial ceremonies. They isolate themselves from governmental matters and technological advancements, yet they are still one of the most developing groups in our country. The Maya culture gives us a sense of value in this country as they were part of the country's history. They showed their value, their past to move ahead as a civilization even at the hands of the colonizers. We have to embrace our past to move forward. As Belizean, we must commemorate our past and go into the future with full consciousness of the past. We must be, we must be proud of our ancestors and their achievement.
Thank you very much, Jackie and Kumar. Thank you, Francer and Alexis, Noelia and Jeremy. You have given us very good narratives, and I commend you for that reflection, or for those reflections. Two groups, the Mayas, and we have two groups having reflected on the Mayas in kind of different lines, no? And another group having selected the Mennonites. Now, we could have selected the Chinese, the Lebanese, the East Indians, and equally, I'm sure we would have gotten valuable insights. So to kind of start to get the ball rolling, with respect to ethnic groups, as Mr. Giovanni said last night, ethnic groups, we have many. Races, we have one. The human race, different groups. Now, Belize is a multifaceted country, right? Different ethnicities, different ethnicities. So much so that the late Jesuit Father Charles Hunter, who was an eminence in Belizean literature and history, he writes that when once they were having a meeting with the Antilles Caribbean bishops, and they were talking about culture, and they were wanting to get a kind of something tangible to compare, to equate that diversity in Belize. And then he comes up with the Sere, or he also said boil up. And I'm sure we have all eaten Sere or and boil up, right? Yes, Jeremy, have you tasted Sere? Boil up?
I have seen it, but I have never tasted.
Okay, you have seen it, so you have an idea. But what Father Hunter says is that there are all these things, no? If you recall, Jeremy, how Sere or boil up looks, they have all these different ground foods, right? Especially the boil up. And when you eat the Sere or boil up, it's a mix, right? And you're tasting how boil up or Sere tastes, but at the same time, each of the foods preserves its unique taste. The uniqueness of each vegetable or whatever is put in the plate, in the mix, preserves its uniqueness, its taste, its peculiarity, and yet adds to the mix. No? So that's the comparison Father Hunter came up with to describe multi-ethnicity in Belize. So my question is, and I invite anybody, you can raise your hand, there is an icon there, and join in the conversation. And if I don't see anybody, I will call on people, but the idea is to raise your hand and just join in the conversation. And if Jeremy wants to capitalize to build upon what Alexis said, he can join in and we start the conversation. So my question is, having seen the multi-ethnicity and having looked at the narratives, what in your view should come first? Should we as Belizeans first have an understanding of who we are, which ethnic group we belong to? I'm a Creole, I'm a Mestizo. Should we first create awareness, learn about our identity as part of that ethnic group, and then embrace the notion of Belizean, or vice versa? Should we think ourselves as Belizeans first, build that national collectiveness, and then ask about my identity as an ethnic group? So that's my question. Where should we begin in creating this national consciousness that Ines Sanchez speaks about? Should we start with me as a Mennonite and then me as the Belizean? Or should we start me as the Belizean and then me or I as the Lebanese? Okay. Let's give the ladies first. Noelia.
Good night, sir. In regards to your question, I believe that we, as the people that compose of Belize, we should first find our identity, like knowing we are mestizo, we are Maya, etc. This is because it is important to know where we come from. It is important to know our history. And then after we know where we come from and who we are, then we can Belizeanize everything. I believe that's essential to know where we come from and then to be able to contribute to the Belize history itself. We need all these different types of cultures.
Thank you, Noelia. Jeremy, you want to say something, build on what Noelia said?
Mr. I think everything is I have heard here from the other forum and here is correct, right? But we're missing something that is I think important that as I was taught in school that education starts at home, then I think that it is important that our parents show our identity from small, from an early age, shows our purpose, shows what is unite, what means and united, and shows our Belizean history. So from home it starts everything.
So
Um,
are you saying that we should know our Belizean history first before
yeah,
knowing who we are as an ethnic group?
yes.
Okay. Okay, Alexis, what do you have to say?
I agree with Noelia. I think we should learn who we are first, and then that will help to shape us as a Belizean country because like when you go to school, the first thing you know is that you're a part of your family. So they teach you your name, your age, and whatever, and then you become a part of the classroom. So I think if you know who you are, you'll be better to able to be a better contributor to the society. And also, sorry, but yeah, basically you have to know who you are before you think of yourself as a Belizean because the different groups is what makes Belize Belize.
Thank you, Alexis. Kumar.
I mean, adding on to everybody, I do think that you have to know your history before you become a Belizean. I think that after knowing your past, right, your ancestors or where you came from, your blood, basically, it will allow you to define yourself and define what is to be Belizean, right? And I think it was Ines or the next essay which said that you know in school they concentrated in like teaching us in history about things that are from outside from from Britain and all these like other countries, but they never kind of like taught, and this was like post election independence, right? And we weren't being taught about our ancestors and everything, and she thought that this was like a problem for colonialism in Belize, right? And I mean, like now that I don't know, 40 years later, that Belizeans are starting to break through from that barrier of colonialism.
Okay. Okay, Kumar. Anybody else would like to add to the conversation? Jackie?
Um, with what has been said so far, I agree and disagree. It is true that we do have to
Wait,
learn
wait,
from our
wait, wait,
background.
wait. That's an interesting comment. You agree and disagree. That's fine. That's fine. Because we presented two scenarios, right? This or that, but it could be a different thing. So let's hear from Jackie. Let's see where she leads us to.
Okay, so as I was saying, it is true that we should learn from our backgrounds, but it also depends how much we should know and how accurate is that information. Because if I remember correctly, I read this about in one of the essays that the Creole at some point stated that Belize was theirs and they arrived first. But then there's also the Maya's point of view, and then there's also the Mennonites' point of view. So then it depends on what we are taught and how accurate that information is. So in order to avoid all of that chaos, I would say we should first learn what we mean as Belizeans, not as in our ethnic groups.
Interesting, interesting, Jackie. Thank you for that insight. France, what do you have to say?
Well, I agree with both my partner Alexis and Noelia because I think it's firstly we should recognize ourselves in our own group as either mestizos. So I believe that we should recognize ourselves as in our own, and therefore then follow it by the bigger picture. To see the bigger picture, you need to see yourself first, and then be able to recognize all the qualities of it is that being a Belizean is.
Okay, very good, France. So here we have opposing views, people who contend that we should first create an awareness of who we are, where we come from, and then move onwards. And Jeremy, and to a certain extent, Jackie said, let's first look at the political picture, no? We are in a state, in a nation, part of a nation. Let's look at the bigger picture, and then within that context, um, see who we are as pertains to our ethnicity. Something very, very important that Jackie brings out is and to a certain extent, some of your other of you said that we need to be careful. I guess Kumar also said that um, how we learn our story, right? And so that uh, we have seen it in our own Belizean story, in how Belize got its name, how some groups appropriated themselves of the explanation of or the origins of the name to kind of meet their political agenda, no? And to eventually say we arrived here first and we had the power. Very interesting, very interesting. Um, which brings us to the question of how to create that national unity, that identity as Belizeans. No, regardless of if we start with identifying ourselves as Belizeans or if we start identifying ourselves as mestizo, um, the question I would like to throw now is how to create that national unity. We saw in the nationalist movement how George Price and the workers' movement, the labor movement, kind of took advantage of the dire events of the day, the hurricane, the pandemic, this unemployment, the Great Depression, the devaluation, to create national unity and rally the people to move them out of those conditions the colony was experiencing. So now, in the year 2021, 40 years after independence, facing another pandemic, unemployment, and an economy that is in shambles, how do we create a national identity, a national cause? That's the question, because there are still many prejudices. For example, today I got up and went out early in the morning to my front porch, and somebody came to ask if I wanted water, the water boys, no? And then they looked down and said, Maestro, look at that. And there in the front of my drain, there was a huge head of a fish head, la cabeza de pescado. It was a huge fish head. It was thrown on the drain and it was kind of decomposing. There were flies around. And then the guy tells me, so and so, I'm not meaning to say to be prejudiced, but I'm saying it because we're dealing with the topic. And he said, so and so chinos. Um, um,
Talk about
I won't
uniting
I
the
won't
people.
say I won't say the other word, no, but so prejudice like that, no, our stereotyping, los cochinos son ellos, or when I was a child or going to Belize City, be careful because they're going to snatch your chain. Los morenos allá les van a arrancar la cadena. So, you know, the prejudices. So my question is, I don't want to talk anymore, but how do we create an identity, a nationalist spirit to move as one, even if Prime Minister Briceño and the unions come to a solution and there are still salary cuts and UNCAC and all these transparency, good governance policies that unions are fighting for are laid on the table and agreed upon. How do we move forward as one? That's my question. Noelia?
Good night, sir. In regards to your question, I believe that we can move forward by supporting one another, supporting each ethnicity in a way, because as you were saying, a lot of people like discriminate. If we see a lot of people rather, there was a reading that mentioned that we have discriminated our own Belizean culture because we believe that everything local is not good, and things that come from states or that we get from states are far better than what we can get here. So I would say support one another, support our own culture, be one, rather than that would also help our economy to move forward if we just support the locals.
All right. Anybody wants to add up to what Noelia said?
Creating a national holiday for the ethnic group
Another holiday.
would
Okay,
be
Kumar, how would
something
you
nice,
baptize that holiday?
just to commemorate um ethnic no, ethnic group day for all the ethnic groups. They come together and share their food. I know.
Okay, okay. I have my reservations about another holiday, but that's your thoughts, no? Anybody else? How do we move forward as a people? Yeah, no, UDP, NIP, UP, Catholics, non-Catholics, Creoles,
I
Mestiques.
mean,
Yep.
I mean, in all, it finally just comes down to education to the people on, us, the new generation. We're the ones who are making like are paving the way to the new things, right? Before, you know, persons, I don't know, older than 30, we might say, they were started to seeing things in a new light. But now the new generation, they're seeing that all these things doesn't have to be colonialism, doesn't have to be elitism, doesn't have to be. You don't have to be judgeful. You could be, all this kind of like really positive qualities in yourself. And I think Belize is like getting better in doing that in a lot of ways and kind of like being not ignorant, because I know you know a lot of our elderly are sometimes a bit you know ignorant just the way how they were born. I think it's a dangerous thing to be ignorant to the things around us. And so I feel the more education you have, the less ignorant you become of things. So one way is, which is already happening, is just education, much more education to new generation.
Yes, Kumar, very important, education. And you made mention of something that's really true, no? That at some point, maybe 40 years from having had independence, there's more of a maturity as a people. We're not there yet, but we have changed, no? The mentality has changed, definitely. Anybody else? Before I call on Ms. Carmita to continue the discussion. Yes, Alexis.
To what add on to what Noelia said, I believe that we should work together and support each other by, choosing Belizean made products over foreign products and supporting small businesses and local stores. In addition to that, I also believe that to be unified, we need to unlearn the divisive mentality that we have been taught, the mentality that some ethnic groups are better than others. And I think the way to do that would be, like Kumar said, with education, can start in schools by not necessarily giving an equal amount of time to the different ethnic groups and classes, because I understand that more different ethnic groups have a different amount of history to contribute towards the country. But I mean to highlight that each ethnic group is important in their own way and to teach them all, because I know I can personally attest to the fact that I did not go in depth with every single ethnic group in the country.
Thank you, Alexis, for that contribution. Um, Jeremy, you had your hand up.
My show, Mr. M, I think that be active on the activities of your community, because I see sometimes people try to clean the river or other things there. Maybe you can help them. And other thing, like Umar said, educate yourself as much as possible what you can. Um, help each other the best as you can, and change that mentality 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 that we have, um that we always say that government have to change. And maybe what we should do, like be like in union, right, and make a change, start to make a change by our own self.
Okay. Anybody else?
Mister,
Yes,
I would
Jackie.
like to add to what Alexis and Jeremy both said, that we first should remove the chains of superiority, both coming from our ethnic groups, who is better and who is not, but also coming from our government, that we shouldn't be as dependent on them. We should be dependent on one another.
Very good, excellent. And
Adding,
this goes to what Alexis presented, no? That we should learn from the Mennonite community. Um, and, um, and likewise, if we see all ethnic groups, we can learn from them. And Jackie, you bring something on the table or to the table, that we need to get rid of superiority, of this chip on our shoulders, no? And that's the only way we can do that if we study who we are, no? We reflect who we are, on who we are. Noelia?
Sir, I also believe that it is very important to remove language barriers, like make sure that Spanish is a subject in every school. People should be able to learn Maya and stuff like that. I believe that it would be very important and a very important step that should be taken, that all languages should be studied in schools.
Yeah, very important point. Mandarin, Chino, Mandarin, Garifuna, right? Very good point, Noelia. Yes, Kumar?
I mean, adding to what everybody been saying about like supremacy, right? And I feel that comes with, in the past about the colonialism, or um one ethnic groups feeling supreme that something else, and that's where like racism comes from, right? We as a persons feeling we're superior than others, and I feel that it is like a big problem, like everywhere. And there's like a specific thing called like elitism, which is basically favoring persons for what they have and what they are over others who they are or what they don't have, right? And I've seen this like all over schools in Belize, like Sacred Heart, UB. It's just everywhere. Like people would favor persons who, okay, all right, if you have this, for example, right, you have this kind of let's say shoes, right? All right, you're gonna be part of my group. And so what person is doing is outcasting persons who don't have good shoes. And you could see that. I feel like in UB, when I went there from a semester, I could see this like all over. You could see like all the persons separated, right? And you could see the common qualities in all these groups. And I think that's something that it just hardens my soul heart, because if Belize, or if that education still, or that kind of education kind of like promotes that kind of feeling or character towards people, I don't think Belize will be going far in like the full 50 years, next 50 years. And I feel that's a really broad topic that has to be advocated for here in Belize.
Excellent, Kumar. Excellent observation. No? And it's something that we need to reflect on after, with this pandemic, because what is happening is the rift between those who have and those who don't have is getting wider. The money is in the hands of the few, and the majority are the ones getting unemployed, getting the salary cut, and eventually with the salary cut, a cut in the services that employs other people. So as Kuma rightly said, it could get worse. And here we're not talking about ethnic separation anymore, but economic, social separation. Alexis? And with this, we will invite Ms. Carmita to converse with you. Alexis?
I would like to add something, Mr.
Okay, Franca, go ahead.
I wanted to agree with Kumar, what he said previously, that it also, if we want to make a change, it has to start with the new generation, because I think that the older generations have been told and taught all these stereotypes about these people, because a group, like how you mentioned, when you go to Belize City, you're gonna get your chain stashed from your neck or something like that, mister. It's something that they have been taught, that they have been believing all this time. So it has to start with the new generation in schools, and not only in schools, but in families. I read somewhere that if a child lives surrounded with other people that have the same beliefs that are wrong, he's gonna grow up to have those same beliefs. And I think that despite us being divided into different groups, which are very different. We should remember and teach others that despite us having all those differences, we have to recognize that we are one and we need each other and of each other in for us to be Belizeans together.
Right, Francis, you hit the head on the nail. The, the la cabeza del clavo, no, the nail on its head, and that's the point that we need to stress, no, that in the end it's you, right? You're the ones that are being educated, and more so at John Paul II with the liberal arts background. No, so important for you to make the difference. Alexis, you wanted to say something?
I didn't. I'm sorry.
Okay, Miss Carmita. We invite Miss Carmita to turn on her camera and enter into conversation with our distinguished panelists. By the way, Ms. Carmita is an anthropologist. She's a social anthropologist. So this is her line, no, of study or discipline. So we invite her to engage with you.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, just very briefly, I read Sister Barbara Ann Flores document and also Mr. Flores essays.
Sanchez.
Sanchez, I'm sorry, Mr. Sanchez. Okay, regarding perhaps a little bit of what they wrote, maybe it can help us to understand our situation nowadays, our actual situation. Sister Barbara Flores mentions the divide and rule, that under colonialism, the colonizers, which would have been what was the Bay of Honduras, Belize, the British, and in Mexico and Central America, it would have been the Spaniards. But going to the British, I think it was to their advantage to divide and rule, and that would be the ethnic groups. You had the Africans, who are the Creoles, the Africans and the mixture of Africans and the British, who are the Creoles nowadays. You had the Mayas that were already here, and then you have the Garifuna that came from the Mosquito Shore, Nicaragua, and other places along the Mosquito Shore. So if we take the divide and rule under colonialism, and this is a question to you, that would make the same problems nowadays with the ethnic groups. You have the Garifuna in Dangriga and Stan Creek. You have the Kekchi and the where the others, and the Mopan in the Toledo district and some in San Antonio. You have their descendants in Socots and other places in Belize, but those are the main regions geographically of the Mayans. Then you have the Creole in Belize City. You have the Mestizo in the western part of the country and also the northern part, which would be Orange Walk. So you have all of these groups that were under colonialism. Now, Mr. Sanchez focuses on the national movement. if we stick to what Sister Barbara proposes at the end of her thesis, in that in order to achieve a Belizean nationality, we should, it says, we should resist, we should live our cultural traditions, we should believe and trust God, and we should embrace the resistance of our ancestors. That is her recommendation. And the same thing with Mr. Sanchez. He says that in order to achieve national consciousness, we should that we should unify. However, the problem comes with the ethnicity, the divide and rule. Remember that under colonialism, the colonizers used that strategy of dividing in order for them to rule. Nowadays, and this is the question to you, do you think, and also to Mr. Ruiz, from everything that he has read, do you think that if we practice these traditions and culture, don't you think that separates us or that prevents us from achieving the nationalism that Mr. Sanchez talks about? Because if you have the Mayas in one region with traditions and cultures, and the Mestizo and the Creole, don't you think that that is precisely what prevents us from achieving that nationalism? Because remember that under colonialism, that was the strategy to divide and rule. Nowadays, the United Nations does the same thing. They support this thing of ethnicity. We give money to the Garifuna, we'll give money to the Mestizo, and we'll give money to this group or indigenous group. And don't you think that they have their agenda of dividing and ruling in order to prevent the nationalism? What do you think? Or do you think that, like Mr. Ruiz said, do you think it's first we should think about being a Belizean and then the individual in this ethnic group? Or do you think firstly we should do the reverse? What do you think that it's precisely this ethnicity that prevents us from being a complete Belizean national? What do you think? Because if you notice, from the Mennonites and the Chinese, the Mennonites and the Chinese as one, they have managed to survive, and they're the ones who are providing us with the basic needs, especially in this time of the pandemic. Whereas we have fallen, well, we don't have much other than being police officers and teachers. We are dependent for our food from the Mennonites and also the Chinese. And it cannot be a coincidence that the Mennonites and the Chinese were not colonized. There were a few Mennonites and some indentured laborers of the Chinese, but they were really not a colonized group of people. So that cannot be a coincidence that they are the ones who are doing very well in the country of Belize, and we we remain at the mercy of the government, and we are a very fragile society. If you stop to think about it, what would we do without the Mennonites and the Chinese and the immigrants who are cultivating the land? I don't know what would happen to us, but do you think, and this is the question, do you think that it's really to our advantage to be clinging on to the ethnic narrative of history? Or do you think maybe we should first, as Mr. Sanchez said, think about being more into this nationalist movement? It's something to think about. Maybe you won't have the answer because we obey our traditions and that gives us our identity. But it could be that that is the plan to prevent us to be a independent nation. We are independent, but at the same time, we are not. You know that the country owes a lot of money that we have to pay back, and that is why there has to be this cut, because the World Bank is not giving, they are demanding, they are the ones telling the government, it's not the PUP. They are the ones who have recommended that this cut be applied. I don't know, Mr. Ruiz, if you told them about Mr. Ashcroft, what Mr. Ashcroft said.
No, I didn't, but in response to your question, Ms. Carmita, Noelia wants to say something.
Yes.
So as to begin the conversation, you've heard from Ms. Carmita.
Good night, Ms. Carmita. In regards to your
Good
question,
night.
I believe that it is not a disadvantage to know each ethnicity. I believe that that is the core of what being a Belizean is, that it is a very diverse country. So it is essential that we do recognize what ethnicities and all the people that make us diverse.
Okay. Well, yes, that is what makes Belize Belize. Precisely the ethnic groups, the rice and beans and the boyos and the seafood. And that is a very good thing that we have. And that is why tourism is attracted to Belize. But also, if you think about it, it's good, but then I think that it has also made us a very dependent country. But then let me see, what do you think? The others?
Okay,
What do you think?
Alexis has raised her hand.
Yes,
I want to
Alexis?
add on to what Noelia said. I agree that the different ethnic groups makes Belize unique. And to what Ms. Carmita said about the divide and rule, I think that the colonizers made us believe that some people are superior and some people are inferior in order to keep us apart and to not realize the strength that all of the ethnic groups would have if they would work together to build the country. So I believe that each ethnic group has something unique to offer to the table, and holding on to traditions would not be a disadvantage, because if you know who you are, then you are confident enough in your capabilities to build belief. So like all of this divisiveness thus far has led us into a sort of turmoil. So like imagine if we actually work together, all of the good things that can actually happen.
Okay, very good. Mr. Sanchez used some very, very sensitive words in his essays, very a little bit, how would I say, yes, sensitive. He says dehumanized, that British colonialism dehumanized us. It made us feel inferior, and we had this complex of dependency. He also says that a foreign culture was imposed on us. And I think that is where our problems began. And it has taken us years and years. Let me see what other thing he says. And he aims for that national consciousness. This is where the conflict in the readings come, because he is aiming for the national consciousness, whereas Sister Barbara Sanchez recommends that we cling on to our cultural traditions and that we also should believe and trust God. Okay, my question to Alexis is, in your opinion, Alexis, what is it that has made the community of the people in Spanish Lookout, you know, I was in Spanish Lookout and I was telling Mr. Ruiz, I said, we are lucky to have the Spanish Lookout, the Mennonites. We can get milk, eggs, chicken. You can, if you need something for the house, you can go to Spanish Lookout. And I said, we are lucky, you know, that to have them. Why, in your opinion, Alexis, what has made them survive and made them successful as a group within Belize? You know, we have so many problems of crime, of people who don't have employment, people who are struggling. Your parents are struggling to pay you your schooling, but what has made them survive and successful in the country of Belize, in your
I
opinion?
I think that they are successful because they are one of the few groups that actually hold on to their traditions and beliefs. And so they have their value system and they have their morals that they go by. And like you can see today that with many of the crime happening in Belize, it's because of a loss of culture. There's like a lot of Americanization and that culture out there that, oh, I have a gun, I can do this, or I don't need to work for what I want. And I believe that is because of a loss of culture and a loss of morals. So the Mennonites hold on to their traditions, which is what makes them successful.
Okay, very good. She mentioned the key word that also Sister Barbara is recommending, and that is the word morals. You know that when you go to a restaurant in Spanish Lookout, you don't have any television. Sometimes you have the screen, but they're just showing like a scene of nature. There is no advertising of Western propaganda, nothing about the United States. And then, as she mentioned, in Belize City, the crime in Belize City would have to do with wanting to have things and not working for them. That would be the imposition of that Western culture, that the Mennonites are not very much into that. Let me see another question to
Miss Carmita,
yes.
Miss Carmita, Kumar wanted to say something.
Yes, Comer.
Just adding to what you asked to Alexis, you know that the Mennonites are known to be really hard workers, and that comes back to their ancestors, right? You know, they came from Germany, and the Germans were known to be this kind of really hardworking persons, and no se dejaban, right? And
Mhm.
they came all the way from Germany to the US, then went to Mexico for a few years I think in the 40s, 50s, and then migrated down to Belize, and they came with nothing, and they created their own cities out of just wood and those hard skills that their ancestors already learned. So they already knew how to build things and how to cultivate things, and so for them that was a big advantage. And they came here, and now they're the ones who supply a lot of our vegetation and poultry.
Yes, that is true. And the same thing would apply to the Chinese. Now, the Mennonites, if you notice, as and Alexis said, they're very unified, and they have their morality and their religion and things like that, and they are not into drinking. I assume that applies to all of them, but also the Chinese are the same. They have managed to remain, even though they are dispersed, they're not like the Mennonites. Some are in Benque, some in Belize City, some in San Ignacio, but it's like they handle themselves as a community too. So if this can work for them, why is it that it doesn't work for us? Do you think it's really that history of colonialism that we have? Was it so bad? Did it hurt us so much that we are so distanced from group to group, or not? Well, we don't have genocide like in other countries, but it seems like we as a group, we don't survive. We have to depend from working with the government, the police officers. Yes.
Jeremy has raised his hand.
I just wanted to say that I recall seeing a video on the British when they were on this land, colonizing the people. So what I saw in the video, the British say that people in Belize, they saw them as people, lazy persons, prideful person, a person that didn't have any view of success in life. So I think it's because of the British that they made us dependent to like foreigners, because of in the video it says that the Creole or any person that were colonized by the British, they were dependent by the British.
Yes, because in that book, Time and the River, the students that in my class, they have found out how some of the food was imported to the slaves, like the salted pork. And I explained to them how some of the food was brought from the Caribbean to Belize, and that maybe that is what has hurt the people in Belize so much, in that we have become very dependent. And that is exactly what Mr. Ashcroft was saying, that on a balance sheet from the people who are in business, on the expense side, Belize has the amount of salaries that Belize has to pay the government, it is too high. It pays too much money to public officers, to teachers, police officers, to nurses and other workers. And on that's the expense. On the income, it's too low. So they have, he said, the recommendation is to bring down the expense side. Okay, so
Miss Noelia wants to say something.
Yes, Noelia.
Did I miss? You asked if you think that if we thought that being colonized hurt us as a country, and I believe that it did. And that is because, as you asked Alexis, if why the Mennonites are able to prosper, and that is because of the mentality that us being colonized brought, which was everything foreign is better than everything local. So
Mhm.
look at the Mennonites as foreign people, so we think that their labor and everything that they provide is much more better than any Belizean can provide for us.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But you know that we don't evaluate how much they brainwashed us until we talk to someone who has never been colonized. You can see how free and how different they are. But we, from the very beginning, remember when maybe you didn't, but like Mr. Ruiz and I, when we started school and Sister Barbara mentions it, the books were foreign. What else? We had to read about from we were in standard one. The books were from the United States about Jack and Jill, and things like were very foreign to us. So we grew up thinking that that was the world, the literature from Britain and the reading and everything from Britain until independence. But, you know, judging other countries, I think it is going to take us many, many years to really get rid of this um, mental colonialism, or this the colonized mind that was implanted in us. Okay, any other?
Kumar,
Yes, Kumar?
Adding to everything, I feel there's a need, since this is like a history class, right? And we're taught all about our history, and I know, of course, that other subjects are really important to understanding why
Hello?
things happen.
yes.
For
Acabo.
example, I don't know, like the the the
Mhm.
the field of economics, for
Hello?
example.
He's talking, Miss Carmita. Go ahead, Kumar.
As I was saying, for example, the field of business, right, or economics, or seeing how your economy works, and you could once you like know a lot of knowledge on how the economy works, you could say, about all right, you could cut off money from persons or all this stuff, or why,
Porque dice the host muted you.
or how
Se
it
acabó?
cannot be done that way, right? So that would be like an example. Another example would be like the field of like psychology, and I think that field is really important to understanding colonialism and mentalities in general, right? For example, like the field of like sociology studies how societies or how people are together, and so I think it is important, like, study all these fields in order to really understand what's going on in the country. It's almost, you have to be really critical to solve the problem.
Good. Thank you very much, Ms. Carmita. I think we have exceeded our time, but it's it's um, it's a very, very broad and deep topic, what we've been discussing, no? Um, and I think we have agreed that it's important that we study who we are, that we reflect. I guess that's the agreement that I see from all this discussion. It's very important to see and understand that I'm a mestizo. I'm different from the Chinese and the Mennonites. It's important for me to see my lights and my shadows in my culture. If I feel superior, if there's this chip on my shoulder, I need to come to terms with that, no? So that's where we said that we need to be careful. That's what Jackie said. We need to be careful about the history we're going to come to terms with, because it has to be
Yes,
a
Jacobo.
genuine, it has to be a genuine history. We have to take a good look, a sincere look at ourselves if we want to grow. So that's the point of understanding that I can see. And I can see as well what Jeremy initially put, that on the sideline, we have to make the connections with our identity as Belizeans. Yes, we are looking at who we are with the purpose of growing, but how do we build bridges with my brother and sisters, the Chinese next door? Hmm? How do I build bridges with the Mennonites? What to question, what are the modern ways of colonization? We are no longer dealing with British colonization. We might have the vestiges in our historical genetic history, but what are those modern forms of colonization? No, we talked about that in the very beginning, that we are now battling with, that are trying to make us forget who we really are, hmm? Which are trying to separate us, as Ms. Carmita said. There are modern ways of colonization that are dividing and ruling to prevent us from building bridges and creating that national identity, as both Ines and Barbara Flores say. So for you to think. So we come to our end of the reflection. And Ms. Carmita, do you have your final words? Ms. Carmita went missing in action. Um, so we won't hear from her, but let me get your final words. We'll start with Jeremy, proceed with Alexis, Kumar, Francer, Jackie, Noelia. Unless Justin has a question. I was forgetting Justin.
I actually had 4 questions, but I don't
Oh.
think we have the time for it, so it's okay. Yeah.
Dilo.
Maybe you can ask one and have everybody respond in 30 seconds.
Put all of them in the chat. You can pick which one you want to answer. Just say which one it is. I'll leave it up to anyone to decide.
If to the first question to Justin, right? If the Maya survived the Spaniards' attack, in that time, what would like the world be now, right? And you were asking like what would be something, because they gave things like mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and all this stuff, right? I think one of their main things would be their religion and beliefs, and um, you know, will be like imposed on people around them, just like the Spaniards did to their religion. Um, but I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I think that would be something that they will contribute to, like, if they survived the attack before, or survived the Spaniards attack.
To answer your third question, how do you think the Maya made the switch from a hunter-gatherer people to thriving agricultural geniuses? In my opinion, I think that it involves their travels towards this land, because as we know, um, they traveled very long distances, and many places did not occupy the right necessities that they needed. So as soon as they reached another place, they explored, they discovered, and they started utilizing, they started seeing how to utilize certain plants, or to see how they could develop a system, the system that they developed, the Malpa system. So yeah.
Yeah, excuse me. In regards to the first question, I believe that if the Maya were, well, the Maya are still present, right? But if the community from back then was still existing, I believe that they would contribute very much in the infrastructure of Belize, and we will be a community that would be more, we would make much more progress, and we would probably be looking like the United States in a sense, because they were very smart and very artistic.
Como quiera.
So, so to answer your third question, the second question, sorry, on the government aid, how do we cut the reliance? I think we need a cultural shift or a cultural refresh, because we have this culture in Belize, like in general, that we don't need to work hard for things. Things will just be handed to us. So I feel like if we have more educational opportunities and more job opportunities, and we stress the importance of education and working for things instead of just handing things to people, that would help that reliance.
Anybody else?
I just wanted to you can end it.
So that's it.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much to all. Your final words, we will start with Jeremy. Don't take more than 30 seconds.
No, thank you everyone for being here. I think Belizean Study was a great opportunity for me to learn more about Belize and everything that happened in the past and is still affecting us in the present. So thank you for this class. Thank you for Mr. David, for Mr. Justin, by helping us all the time and being our guidance. And I really appreciate everything here. And thank you, everyone.
Alexis.
Oh, it's my turn.
Yeah.
Thank you all for a lovely semester, and I hope that we continue to learn about the history of our nation and our people in order to better understand who we are, so that we can contribute to the growth and development and the stride toward unity for our country.
Thank you, Alexis. Kumar.
Thank you, classmates and Mr. David Reyes for this class. I really did learn a lot, and I'll appreciate the knowledge for my future to come.
Thank you, Noelia.
Sir, am I confused? I thought that we were supposed to reflect on like our essays.
What's that?
I think I'm confused because I thought that we were gonna reflect on our essays, like the 3 points.
No.
No, okay, okay. Well, thank you everybody, and I hope that you enjoyed the night's forum. I hope
Thank you,
everybody.
Noelia. France?
Good night, and I want to say thank you for everybody being here and for a great semester. I got to develop my understanding about Belize and all of it.
Jackie?
Thank you to everyone who joined, for Mr. David for a wonderful semester, and for Ms. Carmita for listening to our speeches today.
Thank you. Yes, and you know, how do we put into practice what Barbara Flores says, what Ines Sanchez says? How do we engage in this kind of exercise of uncovering, discovering whom we are, who we really are, and where we're moving to? Is by doing precisely what we did today: conversing, reflecting, taking a pause, and engaging in reflection and putting it into action. And in that way, you as well, you go out and with your friends, with your family, engage in this reflective exercise. We talk, we pause away from this the tyranny of noise with Facebook and social media and WhatsApp. We set aside that colonial tyranny that's killing the Belizean people, that's killing identity, that's preventing us from building bridges. Of course, we can use technology to build bridges, don't get me wrong, but if we don't use it well, it can have a very a bad effect on us, you know, and on society. So we have to know how to handle these powers, no? And the more we strive for self-sufficiency, the more we strive to conquer the tyranny of our vices. You know, you who have gone through philosophy, the more we work to becoming virtuous middle class people, you know, the ones who can strike the mean, the balance of things. You know, the more we are free, as Ms. Carmita says, from this tyranny of colonial influences, that will beset us for the rest of our lives. No? Ms. Carmita, do you have any final words?
Well, the only thing that I would like to say is what this sister Flores recommended is that young people are the ones who are to obtain the consciousness, the Belizean consciousness, and in order to have a free mind and spirit. That's all she says at the very end. She recommends that we practice our culture, that we don't forget the stories of resistance of our ancestors, to believe and trust God, and in order to achieve that consciousness, and most importantly, to have a free mind and spirit. So it's up to you, the young people. That's all I have to say. And thank you for inviting me and to give you some knowledge that I had regarding the topic. And also, I also learned from you students regarding your research on the various ethnic groups of Belize, the Mayas and the Mennonites. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Carmita. And I guess precisely because we are not introspecting, because we're not doing that, we're not deepening, we are not soul searching. We have stayed at a superficial level that we are mestizo, that we are Creole, that we are Chinese. I'm not saying this that the Chinese feel that we are the Mennonites, but I believe that we, the mestizo and all these cultures, that ethnic groups that think that they are the true Belizeans in a way, we have not reflected deeply, and we have stayed there at the superficial levels of consciousness. We have not done soul searching enough, and that is what has created division and separation. Because I believe, and this is my thesis, that if we were to engage deeper and deeper to touch our wounds and heal them, that we would be able to build bridges and achieve that national consciousness. But the only way that will happen is if we soul search deeply and reflect. I don't know if it was Aristotle who said, or Socrates, the unreflected life is not worth living. ¿Quién dijo eso? Socrates.
Yeah, I think it was Socrates.
Okay, yeah. So go out and reflect, do soul searching. And a little story to conclude, and Ms. Carmita can attest to this. I have Chinese neighbors who own a shop. They were recently robbed at gunpoint by two guys who had a bandana, caps, long sleeves. They were captured by the video cameras. And when it happened, people saying, fueron morenos de Belize City. You know, see the prejudices right there. Fueron los morenos. They're not from Benque. And the cameras couldn't even capture the color of the skin because they were attired, covered. Anyway, these Chinese befriended me. I don't know the language and they barely can communicate with me. When they talk to me, I barely understand. And when I talk to them, they barely understand me. But it so happened that I have a lot behind my house. And I don't know how it happened, but little by little, the Chinese came into the lot using sign language. And at some point, I couldn't really understand what they were trying to do, but eventually what happened was that they started coming into the backyard. And after a month or so, if you can see the gardens they have cultivated, they have planted 3 different kinds of vegetables. And I don't know what they say. The only word I learned from them is ni hao. When I see them coming in, I tell them ni hao. And they smile, they grin. So, and they allow me to get vegetables I have learned to consume vegetables that only they knew. I mean, it's particular to their culture, their food, right? But, you know, in the end, we don't really know, we don't really even have to learn their language. It's the language of the heart, of being brothers and sisters, of behaving like neighbors. to build the bridges between ethnic groups and build Belize. Thank you very much. I invite Justin now to put our theme song. All the best to you in your future. Take care. Go out and free the people.
Tu sangre viene de lejos para juntarse a la sangre mía. Tu sangre viene de lejos para juntarse a la sangre mía. El golpe de los tambores se hizo más fuerte nuestra consigna. El golpe de los tambores se hizo más fuerte nuestra consigna. Yada for we Belize. Yada for we Belize. Yada for we Belize. Belize vencerá. Yada for we Belize. Yada for we Belize. Yada for we Belize. Belize vencerá. De San Ignacio a Belize. De Punta.
Good night. Buenas noches. I'll send you my grades, Justin, in the next hour or so.
Bye.
All right, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Muchas.